It's time for Paleo Radio, only on Secular Media Network.
You are now entering Paleo Radio.
Welcome to Paleo Radio with your hosts Jeremiah Bannister and Joe Elder.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Angela. What an amazing day it is to be alive, my friends. I'm Jeremiah Bannister.
And I am Joe Elder.
And you're listening to Paleo Radio. We have so many amazing things for you. It's going to be a great time, Joe.
Oh, yeah. We have quite the political lineup, followed by some sweet technological advances that we've made. There's a lot of good stuff.
Like a cherry on top.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to begin talking about John Roberts criticized the Supreme Court confirmation process before there was a vacancy, and this is over at the New York Times. Amazing piece.
It's going to be fun talking about SCOTUS. Then we're going to move into the GOP convention. Will it be brokered, and who's going to have the power if it is?
After that, why is Bernie Sanders skipping AIPAC conference? Jewish candidate declines invite from pro-Israel group. And we're also going to talk just about the different candidates in general, how they approached AIPAC, what they had to say, and what that means for the future of this country.
Absolutely. Just the influence that AIPAC has in general on our political decisions. And finally, we're going to follow up with scientists grow human heart tissue using stem cells, along with some really awesome new scientific advancements that are coming up very quickly.
It blows my mind, Joe.
Oh, we're talking some really awesome science here.
So we're starting off here. It was amazing reading this because, and I just knew that something like this was going to happen. I see it all the time in the way that politicians are being approached now by the media, where they can go back and find something that was said a long time ago, and especially about this exact topic. It's rampant throughout. But we're talking about the Supreme Court confirmation process and what's going on right now with Republicans saying, put on the brakes. Right? No way, Jose, we're not going to go ahead and do this at all. There's not going to be any kind of hearing at all. But lo and behold, of all the people that had something to say, and of all the times that it could have been said, John Roberts, he criticized the Supreme Court confirmation process, and he did it before there was a vacancy.
Yeah, that's the big thing, too, is, well, the fact that we have to say that he did it or said it before Antonin Scalia passed, it gives reservation to the idea that we already know that it's a very political thing about the choice that's made.
Already, and that it makes sense.
Just because if it wasn't, it wouldn't matter when Robert said it. But because we know how political this process is getting, and we know that, just like you said, we can look back a decade ago and find half the people that are in politics right now and what they're saying, you can find them saying the exact opposite thing only 10 years ago, like Mitch McConnell. But the point is, we see that here, and we know that it's a political process.
Yeah, and you'll find nobody, literally, I would bet everything on this, that there would be nobody in the United States who would go, I don't know why that part of the sentence was even put in there. Before there was a vacancy, what's the whole point of that? Like, everybody just knows what's going on. So, okay, speaking of knowing what's going on, Adam Liptick over at the New York Times. Washington, last month, Chief Justice John G. Roberts, Jr., delivered some blunt remarks about the Supreme Court confirmation process. The Senate should ensure that nominees are qualified, he said, and leave politics out of it. I mean, just it's amazing to think about. The Chief Justice spoke 10 days before Justice Antonin Scalia died, and he could not have known how timely and telling his comments would turn out to be. They now amount to a stern, if abstract, rebuke to the Republican senators who refused to hold hearings on President Obama's nominee, Judge Merrick B. Garland.
And we're going to continue on with Garland later on here, but just a little quick quip into it. He's not the most liberal guy in the world either. It was a pretty prudent choice, I think. He's kind of a middle-of-the-road guy.
There are people on the left that don't like him, right? People on the left that say he's a conservative, and people on the right that say he's a liberal. And there's words like raging or moderate thrown in there all over the place. That's the kind of person you're dealing with. Maybe a little bit eclectic, right? There's things about him that not everybody's happy. That's the whole point, right, of this, that not everybody's happy. There's people on the left and the right that are both kind of frustrated about it, and Obama's statement is, because that's what I'm trying to do, is to make it so that everybody's pleased a little bit and everybody has to deal with a little bit of displeasure.
And you know what? I'm totally fine with that. I think it's the best position to be in, to be honest. Judge Roberts goes on, and he's just basically making an out-and-out point here. Look at my more recent colleagues, all extremely well qualified for the court. And the votes were, I think, strictly on party lines in the last three of them, or close to it, and that doesn't make any sense. That suggests to me that the process is being used for something other than ensuring the qualifications of the nominees.
That suggests. That's a very mild way of saying that.
An elbow, that's a
Yes.
hint, hint, wink, wink. Like
yeah,
that
we're on
suggests,
to this. This is all Yeah, because there's not even a question about it. There's just absolutely zero question about it, and that it's gone on for a long time in different ways, but not so far back in cases related to these two people that are mentioned in the article. They said take the polar opposites, the left and the right. In 1986, Justice Scalia, right? And if I was to think just off the top of my head, how many people confirmed him? What was the vote? I wouldn't have come to 98-0.
Unanimous.
I would have never.
And what year was that?
1986.
86.
And then in 1993, you have Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She was confirmed via vote of 96-3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a small, only 3 dissenters. You know, RBG's, she's a beast up there.
But now, right, and the right says that Scalia was a beast. The left says that Ginsburg's a beast. There you go. But these people go through the process and come out with numbers like that.
Yeah.
And then so you look now and you say, of course, Roberts is totally right. I think it more strongly suggests maybe than he would. But then he's willing to admit, at least publicly. But that suggests to me that the process is being used for something other than ensuring the qualifications of the nominees. Totally 100% true. It's a fact.
It's an absolute fact.
Take it to the bank.
Yeah, we know it is.
Yeah.
We know that. We also know that the way that this has been playing out it's political pandering, because people think it's the end of the damn world if somebody opposite of their political ideology gets into the Supreme Court. Now, I understand the idea. They'll say, man, it's the law of the land. It's the biggest, it's the highest court we can possibly have. It's extremely important to have people with our views on that court. True. But even with the mixed views, we make this point all the time on this show, which is called Paleo Radio, by the way.
Yeah.
We make this point all the time that, hey, gay marriage was passed with Antonin Scalia sitting on the court. Obamacare is
couple
passed
times.
Yes. That guy's what? He's our Supreme Court devil man, right? He's the awful righty on the Supreme Court. Still got those very liberal ideals passed. So the point is, the system can work with multiple ideologies up there. I think having a balance is important, but I don't think if we had someone even farther to the right of a guy like Merrick Garland, I still wouldn't be shaking in my space boots.
Right, I wouldn't either. We've said that before, and if people just kind of look back and kind of rate their lives over the last 8 years or so in terms of how the Supreme Court's affected them, you could go on all sides of this debate, and you're going to have people raging and saying, "Oh, it was the worst for me," and and all the while still treating it in a partisan way. You know, but you've got people like Kagan and Sotomayor. They were extremely well qualified, according to Roberts. That's how he describes them. Then what would he think of Garland? I think he would think he's obviously a good guy, and I hope that he doesn't leave him out to dry in a way, because they worked with each other.
Yeah. Justice Roberts said something about Garland. He said, anytime Judge Garland disagrees, you're in a difficult area. Basically saying that he can defend his reasons for disagreement or, for agreeing for that matter.
And at his own confirmation hearing in 2005.
I think he does have a level of respect for Merrick Garland, but ultimately, going back to the main point, hey, the world's not going to crumble if there's somebody who's right wing up there. It's not going to end the whole process. And I don't think it's going to swing the whole court either. I don't have a problem with somebody when they write their dissent having a long explanation for it that you can read. If they can articulate it really well, and I think Antonin Scalia did many times, then I think that's something that we can all learn from in the process, too, to be honest.
And if people want to know our take on this, you can go back and listen to what would it be, a Requiem, I guess, for Scalia where we talked about him and Ruth Bader Ginsburg and the way they viewed each other, not only as jurists, but also as friends, and how that really should impact even this. But I don't want to go back too far on that. You can listen to it for yourselves. But Roberts, he brings this whole thing back to it really boiling down to the legitimacy and authority of the Supreme Court. He says this, quote, "When you have a sharply political, divisive hearing process, it increases the danger that whoever comes out of it will be viewed in those terms. If the Democrats and Republicans have been fighting so fiercely about whether you're going to be confirmed, it's natural for some member of the public to think, well, you must be identified in a particular way as a result of that process." He said this, too. "We don't work as Democrats or Republicans, and I think it's a very unfortunate impression the public might get from the confirmation process."
That's it right there, is we don't work as Democrats or Republicans. I think it's the most important thing he said in the entire interview.
Yeah.
Because it gives a different impression of what the Supreme Court's role and function is. Their role and function isn't to play partisan games at the top. And so the way that the parties do line up for certain candidates and the way that it's aligned like this, particularly the right will line up or go against, it shows that it's turning everything into a game. But you know what? The MO of the right in the last 8 years has been drag your feet, say no, make the process go into a grinding halt. So why would anyone be surprised that that's the tactic for the rest of the term for Obama?
Yeah, I would go even further and say that this is kind of the most iconic way that they can do this, because the one branch of the government, right, the one branch that is supposed to be spared the rod of partisanship and the kind of populist revolt that comes inevitably from that, that whole process literally is being gummed up right now, being not just gummed up, but completely stopped, shattered to a gazillion pieces with a jackhammer by a group that right now is in a crazy state within the party itself, within the democratic system that we have.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, this is, okay, so we're beholden literally at this point to the Looney Tune nonsense that's going on over in the GOP conventionally. And listen, we're going to talk more about this later on in the show. It's chaos. It's chaos. So for them to act as if they're being pious, give me a break.
In 2007, Justice Scalia had said, "I was confirmed 98-0. I was known as a conservative then, but I was perceived to be an honest person. I couldn't get 60 votes today."
If they're honest and if they're qualified, then the Senate's got to do its job. And listen, I think Chief Justice Roberts should say something about this. Garland's a good guy, he's qualified, and Roberts knows it. We'll be right back.
Love Paleo Radio? Join the club. Support our work by visiting patreon.com/Paleo Radio today.
Back to Eagle and Dragon.
Pretty pumped up about our Twitter, Joe.
Yeah, we are getting some serious social media action. We want to thank you guys for interacting with us.
Yeah, we got Omri Saren, and it was pretty interesting. We went huge resume. You got to go check it out. Omri Saren, OMRICEREN.com. But over here, something caught our attention. Omri is a PhD candidate in communication at USC Annenberg. He tweets about academic theory and everything else that's not politics. Travel, zoos, science news, programming jokes, etc.
Yeah, he seems like a very interesting guy.
And you can follow him at Omri Saren.
And along with Bill Hunsicker, who is also a new follower of ours, we want to thank you for joining up with us. He is from Hamilton, New Jersey. Seems like a pretty cool dude.
Very cool guy. And very excited to have him on board on Twitter. It's an awesome place to follow us. You got to check it out at Paleo Radio Show.
All right. Let's get into the next topic. Who will have the power at a brokered GOP convention? This is by Elaine Kmark. What should the Republican Party do about Trump? That is the question on the minds of many as we go into the final round of primaries and caucuses, a round in which Trump could get the most votes, the most delegates, and perhaps even lock up the nomination. But in the past few weeks, the anti-Trump forces have been getting their act together, somewhat belatedly. And the political class is salivating over the fact that there could be a brokered convention for the first time in more than half a century. How would that happen? And who are the brokers? And this article is really well written. Elaine Kmark does a fantastic job. But she lays out 5 scenarios. We're going to kind of jump through them really quick. But the very first one is Trump wins a majority of delegates and goes on to win the first ballot. Once he amasses the necessary delegates, Trump might pivot to the general and turn into a thoughtful, serious person who stops insulting people and stops making ridiculous statements. He cleans up his act just enough to hand him the tepid endorsement from the rest of the party. Do you think that's something that could happen?
Well, I know that everybody's talking about that because that's kind of the best hope he's got, is that he could possibly change his tune. You can literally hear many in the media, especially the people who like him a lot, trying really, really hard to convince him to do everything totally different when it comes to women. For example, right, that women, he's really not doing a good job. And just, what was it, yesterday? The whole situation coming out saying that maybe women who have abortions should be prosecuted. And listen, there are people out there who believe that.
Center of the road independents or middle of the road independents, if those people haven't been bought by him so far, he's not going to come garnish those people in the future, I don't think. They're not going to forget what he said at the start of his campaign. And if anything, it kind of puts you in the position of saying, well, you're either just feeding everybody the line you want them to hear, which makes you don't seem genuine, or you're seriously changing your tune, and you did in only a matter of a few months, which that makes me question if you're going to change your mind in another few months anyways. So it's kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't, if you go into that area.
And both sides do this thing. This is a kind of a wave of the wand that both sides do when they try to get people for the general election, that they're going to have to gravitate toward the middle, if they're on the left or if they're on the right. But anyway, so the second possibility is that Trump wins a majority of delegates and goes on to win on the first ballot. But the congressional wing of the party goes it alone. And in this scenario, Trump gets a majority of delegates and wins the nomination, but the rest of the Republican Party decides to just give up on the presidency this time around. Led by Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and Speaker of the House Paul Ryan, the congressional leadership separates itself from Trump and gives a backhanded endorsement to Hillary Clinton by campaigning on the need to have a solid Republican Congress in order to stop what they consider President Hillary Clinton's worst ideas.
Now, here's my statement. I honestly think that's the best idea of all of them.
You think that's the best one?
I really do. Well, if we want to play the game of being the most real, what's the most plausible thing that could happen in terms of looking at the track record is that they say, well, what are we prepared to defend that we know within ranks people are still going to be counting on us on? Well, that's when we hold Congress and we can defend Hillary Clinton's bad ideas. And we can talk about how much we fought against Barack Obama's bad ideas and how we stopped him from destroying America as bad as he could have. And we're going to do the same thing for Clinton. I don't know. I think it's something that they could sell.
No matter what decision is done here to take it away, there's going to be some serious chaos. But I'll tell you who could easily do the swing, who could easily say, hey, listen, we're going to give it to Hillary. It'd be the neoconservatives.
Oh, yeah. Well, they'd be interested. They'd be very interested in doing that.
It would be a welcome home party for them. It would be like, hey, well, you guys, why don't you could go right back into where you came from. But they don't like Hillary, even though she's kind of a poster child, a little bit, an aging one, for the military-industrial complex. I mean, she's kind of a pinup girl for that.
She would be one that they would count on if they're looking at everybody else that's running in the race, because you can't count on Donald Trump for a solid, silent military-industrial complex. He could very well walk out there with a book and be like, you know what else they're doing? Da-da-da-da-da-da. You just don't know with a guy like that. The third option is Trump wins enough delegates to win on the first ballot, but he does not have enough friends at the grassroots level of the Republican Party to elect delegates who are loyal to him. Now, this could also happen, too. Already, conservatives like Roger Stone are warning Trump to beware of the Trojan horse delegates. The draft rules for the Republican National Convention stipulate that delegates have to vote for the person who won their state, or at least cast their votes proportionally. Now, this kind of makes me think of things kind of like the Ron Paul rule. The idea where at the conventions, they will change the rules on a whim. And the Republican Party will do this. I think the Democratic Party is no higher. I think they would do the exact same thing because it's about preservation of power. But it shows that this can definitely happen too. The idea of, well, we're going to try to rig the system to game a lot of these delegates out of here.
Well, and the whole thing is, yes, they could put together a rule, right, that says you don't have to vote for the person that your state is tied to. Right? That fundamentally, you'd be reversing the order back to a superdelegate situation, which is actually, that's not too long ago, and that's maybe a strength to this argument. I think it was, Ben Ginsburg. I think he was on MSNBC and launched this whole idea about when it was kind of panic mode, and people were like, what could be done? And, of course, he's the Romney guy. He's the guy that was involved with the whole plot against Ron Paul. And here is the thing, is that to do this, they'd have to tinker with different rules, and one of those rules would be the one that they put in place just last time around to deal with Ron Paul. And it would be, at that point, wouldn't it just be blatantly obvious at that point that, okay, you kind of got away last time with saying, oh, this wasn't a scheme at all. But this time around, there's no way you can say that.
No, there isn't.
And that's your, listen, you've just literally put your cards on the table, but it doesn't matter because what can be done? Yeah. that's what it is.
On this topic, I jotted down in my notes, it shows that Republicans have been on the ropes for a while, changing the rules to push delegates around. This has been a long time coming. Just in the sense of, it's a struggle for power, and we're seeing the cracks of it. We saw the cracks of it 4 years ago when they struggled to control the delegate count for Ron Paul. And now it's even a wilder, even a more brash tornado that's coming at them, and they're thinking all possible angles and ways of trying to get out of it. But truthfully, maybe it's just better to go in your basement and wait for it to blow over.
They're having secret meetings. I mean, this is the thing. I was thinking about this recently, and I said, I don't think I have ever seen a more systematic effort to go after one person, not just from multiple candidates in one party, but also multiple candidates in another, and the media, the way media talks about it, the way presidents talk about it, and people from other countries talk about it. I said, I've never seen anything like it, and I can imagine, I really can. I can imagine with all the secret backdoor meetings and all of this, even if after Trump goes away, when Trump's done, the party that's going to be pissed off at what happened to Trump is going to be around. Mm-hmm. Those people now exist. They have been mobilized. These people are winning states. You cannot underestimate the impact that they've had in a very short period of time being newcomers to the game. They're far more successful than Bernie Sanders. And he's got newcomers to the game, but apparently Trump's done a better job mobilizing people on the ground. My whole point is dramatic impact.
Well, I think that this is a complete postulation, but if there's people who disagree with me, please write me and let me know. You can do that on our Twitter, or you can do that on our Facebook at Paleo Radio Show. But I really think that there's a lot of people that feel like Donald Trump is just unveiling the curtain of what people have wanted Republicans to say for a long time, and that when they say we need stronger immigration, they don't want to hear stronger immigration. They want to hear, I want a wall, and we want to pick and choose. And there's things that he said that it's the subliminal messaging. They interpret that as political correctness, I think. And when he says, I'm going to get rid of the political correctness and just tell it like it is, he's trying to tap directly into what those people have been hearing Republicans hint at for the last maybe 20 years.
Even longer.
Or even longer.
I mean, yeah, oh yeah.
And to a lot of people, that's refreshing. I don't think they really even care where the consequence is as much as they're saying, thank goodness somebody's just saying it. And that is what I think the danger of him is.
Because I think they accept the idea that they're beautiful losers. They don't win very much. Those ideas, the nationalistic, anti-globalist ideas, have been pummeled, right? Words like isolationist or protectionist are very, they're slurs at this point against people who take a position contrary to globalism. But the other compromise would be this. The other possibility, the way they could do the convention, would be the outside compromise. You know, this would be like option number 3, but brings in someone like Paul Ryan or Mitt Romney, etc.
White horse, right?
Yep, somebody who comes in from out of nowhere on a white horse.
Yeah. Well, hey, it could It could shake things up, but I don't think it would stop Donald Trump. I really don't. I mean, just frankly, we don't have to spend much time on this. It could make things interesting, but it wouldn't stop him.
I don't think that'll happen anyway.
The fifth one is Trump goes into the convention with a plurality, but not a majority of delegates. This guarantees a second ballot even without his opponents having to win votes on rule changes. In this scenario, there's no test vote to determine which other candidate might have the strength to put together a majority. So expect either a long period of negotiations between the first and second ballot, or more than 2 ballots. That's an interesting concept as well.
The whole thing's going to be wild, and it's all going to be televised, and it's going to be discussed right here on Paleo Radio.
Next, we're going to be talking about Bernie Sanders and some AIPAC speeches and AIPAC in general. Stick around.
If you leave, you can't come back in. Paleo Radio will return.
Now back to Joe and Jeremiah.
We have a special thank you to Jenica Grail, who is a secular humanist, atheist, and blogger at reallifebeyondfaith.com. She mentioned us and said, "These guys rock my socks off. I just started listening to the podcast Paleo Radio with Jeremiah Bannister and Joe Elder, and I love it. Check it out."
And you got to check out the comment section. It's totally hilarious. We got into a fight, right? Or at least threats of a fight with hugs.
It was like a love fight.
It was a love fight, and it was totally hilarious. There's a great video from Philadelphia. But I have to say this about her. She's also the social media guru now over at Secular Media Group,
which we are a part of.
All right, so here's the deal. Bernie Sanders totally didn't make AIPAC this year. It's a piece over here entitled, "Why is Bernie Sanders Skipping AIPAC Conference? Jewish Candidate Declines Invite from Pro-Israel Group" by Ismat Saramangla over at International Business Times. When AIPAC, the country's leading pro-Israel lobby group, hosts its annual policy conference in Washington next week, most of the presidential candidates will be attending, alongside Vice President Joe Biden. But one contender will be noticeably absent, Senator Bernie Sanders, who also happens to be the only Jewish candidate ever to win a presidential primary. The American Israel Public Affairs Committee invites all presidential candidates to the conference in election years, and it's a reliable campaign stop for candidates on both sides of the aisle, on the left and on the right, looking to gain influence with the group's powerful audience. So it's a common stop.
Yeah, and I think an unjust stop, to be honest. What other group? Is there a Germany policy committee that all presidents attend before they get their presidential nod? That just, to me, honestly, and I know that I probably catch some guff for this, but it's pretty much a swear your allegiance to Israel meeting.
It is.
It's a, we promise to continue to support you in whatever you're doing in the Middle East, because that's our game. And it's a reaffirmation of said facts.
And for more information on that, you can check out the book, The Israel Lobby. It's fantastic. I've got it in my library here. But the Sanders campaign released a letter from Sanders on Friday afternoon declining AIPAC's invitation, explaining that Sanders would be unable to attend because of his campaign schedule. And it said this, quote, "Obviously, issues impacting Israel and the Middle East are of the utmost importance to me, to our country, and to the world. Unfortunately, I'm going to be traveling throughout the West, and the campaign schedule that we have prevents me from attending," end quote. So there was disagreement on whether that was legit.
Because he did still talk about Israel.
He talked about it same day.
At great length.
To a big audience.
This is an article out of Huffington Post. It says Bernie Sanders delivered a killer AIPAC speech in Utah, and it's by Samantha Lockman. And it is interesting what he said. Now, we can kind of postulate why he did go or why he didn't go, but if we look into what he said in what would be his AIPAC speech, it's kind of telling that I think he would have probably got booed out of the room.
Oh, totally.
You know,
Yeah.
Just a little quip. He said, "It's absurd for elements in Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government to say that building more settlements in the West Bank is an appropriate response. It is the most recent round of violence in the country." He argued that the new settlement construction ultimately undermines Israeli security and predicted that Israel would have to pull back settlements in the West Bank, just as it did in Gaza. And he criticized Netanyahu's government for withholding tax revenue it collects on behalf of the Palestinian Authority.
Yeah, and you can go, listen, I actually encourage people, go to feeltheburn.org, and you can find Bernie Sanders on Israel. And there's a whole bunch of stuff, in fact, that he's got on here. Believes in a two-state solution. right? Believes that Israel has a right to exist in security, and at the same time, the Palestinians to have a state of their own. And he also doesn't believe in approaching people in an uneven manner. He doesn't want to put too much stock in one side and make him appear like he's not an even broker.
And I guess we can open up this bag of worms. Can the U.S. be an even broker in the discussions between Israel and Palestine?
Well, and that's where, I don't believe that.
Should we ever even be involved in trying to have any type of diplomacy involved with that? I honestly don't know.
Or just to leave it, or not to lead it, but to change the way that the whole delegation is led.
There's a way of supporting it, but not leading it. I think us being involved with one side saying we want a diplomatic answer is just disingenuous at face value.
I'm not sure Bernie buys that, especially if he's running for president.
I don't think he buys that. That's
right.
My own opinion and postulation.
There were some Jewish writers that said that it made perfect sense that he doesn't go. Yair Rosenberg, a senior writer at Tablet, a magazine about Jewish thought and culture, he brought up the fact that Bernie is running a domestic campaign, and he insinuates anyway that he tries avoiding any talk about foreign policy at all. And I don't buy that line one bit. There's a lot of anti-war people supporting Bernie for very good reason. It's not like an accident that they all happen to be there at the same time. But it is no doubt he's focusing primarily on a domestic issues campaign.
Yeah, I would probably throw it at a percentage-wise. It's 80% in-house and 20% foreign policy, something like that. I mean, he does mention things, but you're right. I think that is the focal point of Senator Sanders' campaign, and based on the constituency that he's having or that he's kind of amassing, that group of people, I don't think they would view him going to AIPAC and talking to those groups. They would view that as him, in a way, quote-unquote, selling out. Here he is going to a large group of donors to kind of go pander to donors to get donations for his presidential bid. That's exactly what he talks about not doing. So I think it's more of a stance for his audience, too.
And his constituency is not probably reading much Tablet magazine. Over against, for example, Max Blumenthal, senior editor at Alternet. That's kind of more Bernie's crowd.
Yeah.
Started a petition at both change.org and rootsaction.org calling Sanders to reject the AIPAC invitation. Altogether, at the time of this reading, the petitions have garnered about 19,000 signatures in total. The petition reads thus, quote, "As the main arm of the pro-Israel lobby in the United States, AIPAC is sworn to promote the racist, militaristic, and anti-democratic policies of the most right-wing government in Israel's history. With his promise to seek a level playing field on Israel and Palestine, Bernie does not belong on the same stage as these figures." That's some bomb throwing.
There you go. And he's basically saying he shouldn't be there. And I'm not saying that that's all of Bernie Sanders' camp, because I don't think that's true. I don't think people would have not voted for Bernie if he went to AIPAC, or if there was a group that's a very small one. But I think just per the rhetoric that he's been saying, and it could be a tarnish on the campaign he's trying to run.
And see, Max Blumenthal, even Max Blumenthal would vote for Sanders if he went and spoke at AIPAC.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I bet you $1 gazillion.
He just disagrees with it.
But see, here's the thing, man. I'd be curious. It's one of these if only if kind of things. If Bernie did go, what would he be committed to talking about? Like, for example, the funding of the military. I mean, we spend ridiculous, eye-boggling, right, numbers on Israel and their defense. And we spend it with big machine guns, big tanks,
and
big
air
planes,
defense systems.
and air defense systems, and all this stuff that they use, right? That this is what is causing many of the problems that a lot of Bernie's supporters, that they decry. And so what would he say about that? I don't know. Maybe he's officially already spoken. I mean, he's obviously voted. He's got a voting record on the matter. But it would be something that if he had to speak about it, people are watching him on social media. That would have been shared all over the place, and I would have been curious to know what he would say in that audience. Maybe he'd draw that hard line in the sand and say, this is exactly where I stand.
Yeah. Well, I think he would say, I don't think he's as hardcore as everybody wants him to be on the issue, but I think he has the most prudent stance. He has an actual two-state solution. I don't think he would say, we're not going to defend Israel. I don't think he would go say that.
No, not at all. I think his voting record proves that.
And I think when you're running a campaign also, when you know that AIPAC is the largest lobbying firm for Israel, and you know it's just a landmine that you could possibly step on, why in the world would you go step on it?
So the writer asks this: why aren't American Jews warming up to Sanders? Says blacks were excited about Obama, Mormons were excited about Romney, many women are excited about Hillary. But what of Jews and Sanders? Why isn't he gaining traction with them? And there's kind of this lukewarm thing going on. But Michael Cohen, this is again over at Tablet, it's an online magazine about Jewish culture, said this, quote, "The historical Jewish experience in Poland is not what one would exactly call rosy. Being a Polish Jew is not necessarily a point of pride. It's just very odd for any Jew to invoke their Polish heritage rather than their Jewish heritage." And they're referring, obviously, to Bernie Sanders when talking about his heritage. He said that he's a son of a Polish immigrant.
Boy, it just sounds really racist-y.
It does kind of sound a little
It does.
racist-y,
I'm sorry.
doesn't it?
I mean, I understand but that's a judgment of his own. But he said, what did he say? It's kind of weird that he would invoke his Polish heritage over his Jewish heritage.
He said being a Polish Jew is not necessarily a point of pride. And here's why there's a little bit of pride here for Bernie Sanders. If you go to that feeltheburn.org site again that I told you about, it says, yes, his father was a Jewish immigrant from Poland, where the Nazis decimated the Jewish population during the Holocaust. And it's got a link that talks about why would you not have pride to be from a group that had to withstand one of the, I don't understand this argument.
I don't understand
get
it at all. Anytime you get into the game of questioning someone's ethnic background or where their nationality lies based on your own opinions, even if you are the same ethnic background or the same nationality, it's usually just kind of a dangerous game to get into.
It
kind
is
of like me calling you un-American, right? Even if you don't identify totally as being an American, it's still just hella offensive.
I guess I just never learned. I didn't get the memo that Polish Jews couldn't reference the fact that they were Polish.
Jews.
Or Jews, right? But Jonathan Sarna's mentioned in this, the author of, quote, American Judaism, a History. He's also a professor of American Jewish history at Brandeis University. And he says, quote, the great irony of the story is that Bernie Sanders does not have Jewish grandchildren, but Mr. Trump does. That perhaps explains why Bernie Sanders has not been greeted by the Jewish community quite the same way, say, that Joe Lieberman was when he ran for vice president in 2000. They mentioned that Sanders' wife was not Jewish and that their grandchildren don't seem to identify at all with their Jewish heritage.
Man, I mean, call me crazy, but I think it has a lot less to do with his wife being a Jew or not, or his kids. A lot more to do with his political position on the issues, right?
Yeah, because his political position, in many ways, it would be, I don't know, a little jarring. But I don't think that's nearly as jarring as the low blow of questioning the whole Jewish thing with Bernie. I have a hard time taking arguments too seriously when they're just tinged with that whole racist-y thing. Whenever you read something like that and it kind of burns you on the nose and you're like, youch, that doesn't look good at all.
That was well seasoned with racism. Next, we're going to be talking about some awesome scientific advancements. Stick around.
For debates, interviews, or speeches, contact Paleo Radio Show at gmail.com.
You love to hate 'em, you hate to love 'em. You just can't get enough of 'em, you sick freaks. Paleo Radio's on the air.
We made this awesome video for Team Tiny Dancer. It's behind the scenes chemo day at Helen DeVos Children's Hospital. You can see it if you go on Facebook. We posted it at Paleo Radio. Really easy to find us, facebook.com/Paleo Radio. You can find the video there. In fact, I uploaded it directly to Paleo Radio. If I remember, I think I did. I think I shared it directly, so I didn't have to share it anywhere else. You can just go to our videos there, and you can find it.
And because he's a selfless man, I'm going to do it for him. If you guys would like to donate to the Team Tiny Dancer story, any type of videos, any type of messages you want to send for support, if you can't donate financially, please do that. It's a big cause. You can go to GoFundMe and do that. You can also go to TeamTinyDancer.com.
Yep, GoFundMe.com/TeamTinyDancer can get the Bannister family to Reason Rally in Washington, D.C.
Yes, and that is the plan. All right. Next article out of nydailynews.com. Scientists grow human heart tissue using stem cells. This is pretty interesting stuff. Scientists from the University of Pittsburgh turned human pluripotent stem cells into a precursor of heart cells, then used a mouse heart, quote, scaffold to grow them into a heart muscle. Researchers say the findings are a small step towards being able to manufacture and transplant organs.
It's a small step, but it's totally amazing what's going on here. And it really sets the stage for future development. And listen, we're going to go through a lot of really deep stuff here. We're going to break it down for you. Don't go anywhere. It's going to be tons of fun.
Yeah, it is really amazing. And basically, get into the idea of thinking no more waiting lists for heart transplants. Literally, your insurance company could possibly grow your heart for you, your replacement heart. I mean, think in those terms here. A team from the University of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, used induced pluripotent stems called iPS cells generated from a human skin cell to create precursor heart cells called MCPs. So they took human skin cells, reverted those back into pluripotent stem cells, which would be, they have a chemical, it's basically a chemical code you would put on to the skin cells that revert them back to stem cells, and then grew heart cells out of it. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, rewind, implant, let grow.
Yes.
Yeah.
iPS cells are mature human cells reprogrammed into versatile primitive states, which they can be prompted to develop into any kind of cell for the body.
That's amazing.
I mean,
think of the ramifications of that. Think of all of the different things in this world. I mean, seriously, everybody, just really, this is mind-blowing. To think about all the different things in this world that we need for as individuals in a species that dies, that we need, and that's maimed.
Yeah.
Right? That loses limbs, that's born without things, that's born with serious conditions, that can kill people, can kill babies. And all of a sudden, there can be something that could totally transform this, and transform, and I don't want to jump the gun on this, but to transform the way that you have to wait, and how long you have to wait to drop that line down real hard, real fast. And this stuff's literally on the horizon. I think that news like this is like the sun shining, and it's a ray that says, there it is.
It's time to throw this guy out there just because this is some really revolutionary stuff. His name is Juan Enriquez. He did a TED Talks that is just phenomenal, basically explaining these type of scientific procedures or medical procedures. And the analogy he uses is a ski lift in a mountain. So if you think of a mountain, think of skiers on the top of the mountain, and that would be pluripotent stem cells. Those are stem cells that can turn into any other cell in the body. They're at the very top. Once it gets too full of stem cells or there's too many skiers, people start going down the hill. When you go down the hill, you're turning into a heart cell or a bone cell or a skin cell. And it's really hard to take a skin cell and revert back to a pluripotent stem cell. But it's easy to take a stem cell and lead it into being bone marrow or a heart or something like that. And what science has discovered is basically a chemical ski lift. You can put 4 chemicals on top of the skin cell or the heart cell or the bone cell and revert it back. It's magical. It literally, I mean, what it makes me think of is the word magic. Because in truth, magic is almost deception of the eye, but in fact, it is real life logic and physics.
There's real stuff happening.
Yes.
Right. And you mentioned earlier, you used the word scaffold, and I just wanted to quote this here. The scaffold is a network of non-living tissues composed of proteins and carbohydrates to which cells adhere and grow on. So that's,
yeah. And that's necessary if you're growing something in a petri dish. See, organically, that scaffolding is built in. It's already in the process. But if you're growing in a plastic petri dish and you're adding and making kind of your liquid chemical soup there, it's necessary to have a scaffolding. And so placed on the 3D scaffold, this is going back into the article, placed on the 3D scaffold, the precursor cells grow and developed into a heart muscle. After 20 days of blood supply, the reconstructed mouse organ, quote, began contracting again and at the rate of 40 to 50 beats per minute, said a University of Pittsburgh student.
Wowzers.
So
just imagine seeing that.
Yes. And
imagine being there for a second. Wow.
In being one of the leading researchers, this is Li Yang, they say, it is still far from making a whole human heart. So it's not to say that human beings have all of a sudden we've created the utopia, right? But it is to say we're very, very close. We're getting there. They go on to say, quote, we hope our study would be used for the future to replace pieces of tissue that's damaged by a heart attack or perhaps the entire organ in patients with heart disease. And according to the World Health Organization, an estimated 17 million people die of cardiovascular ailments every year, and most of those are heart disease.
Yeah, so it doesn't work all the way yet, but the stuff that it's building on and the stuff that it's doing is the forerunner, the necessary preconditions, right? Things that you're learning as you're marching along to a place where you would be able to change and to have a transplant of something that was damaged by heart disease, for example, or conditions with the lungs.
And imagine having a child, and the minute you have the child, they run a genome sequencing of the kid, because we are getting close to mapping the first 10,000 genomes because it's getting so cheap. So we will get to a point where when you have the baby, they can take a swab of their mouth, map their genome, and say, there's a predisposition to heart disease in your family. Part of your insurance plan is probably going to be engineering or creating a backup heart for you when you hit about 50 years old.
You think it'll be as simple as getting braces?
Not in our lifetime, but in the future.
Will people just be living forever at that point?
I don't think people will live forever.
How would death happen?
Well, because cells still age, and you can replace vital organs, but it's still, at the same time, I don't think I think it's kind of like a car, right? You can replace the motor, you can replace the tires, you can replace the brakes, you can replace the whole body, but at the end of the day, it wears down to a point where it just cannot withstand it. The laws of entropy still exist.
You'd be patchwork. You'd be a very hollow man.
I don't think this is finding the answer to living forever by any means, but it definitely is finding the answer to, instead of having a pacemaker, grandma gets an entire heart transplant with a heart that's been genetically engineered to match her body.
Yeah, quite obviously superior. I'd much rather have a brand new thing than to have a pacemaker.
Absolutely.
Who wouldn't, quite honestly? But according to the study, it's that due to a shortage of donors, that end-stage heart failure is irreversible. And, I didn't know that. That's the state of things as they are, folks. If you are in a bad place when it comes to heart disease, end-stage heart failure, it's just irreversible. And not maybe because stuff's simply not there, due to the shortage of donor organs.
And it's just there's just simply not enough people donating. And that's the thing, is this is solving so many problems. It's creating different moral and philosophical arguments, no doubt. But the argument of having to do embryonic stem cell research from just fetuses and things like that, or the idea that Planned Parenthood has some game involved where they sell them, that was a big 90s thing. That's all over. Now we know how to revert things back to pluripotent stem cells. We don't even need that anymore.
We talked about this actually before the program, before we pushed record. And we were talking about what are adult stem cells. And reading here says an adult stem cell is thought to be an undifferentiated cell found among differentiated cells in a tissue or organ. The adult stem cell can renew itself and can differentiate to yield some or all of the major specialized cell types of the tissue or organ. The primary roles of adult stem cells in a living organism are to maintain and repair the tissue in which they are found. Scientists also use the term somatic stem cells instead of adult stem cell, where somatic refers to cells of the body, not the germ cells, sperm, or eggs. Unlike embryonic stem cells, which are defined by their origin, cells from the pre-implantation stage embryo, the origin of adult stem cells in some mature tissues is still under investigation.
Yeah, so just to make sense of that real quick, think about it as somatic stem cells are adult stem cells and pluripotent stem cells are embryonic. They're more adaptable, embryonic stem cells are. That's basically what it's saying. But they both have very high qualities, and I'm reading out of the National Institute of Health, and this is one of the biggest ones. Embryonic stem cells can be grown relatively easily in culture. Adult stem cells are rare in the mature tissues, so isolating these cells from the adult tissue is challenging, and methods to expand their numbers in cell culture have not yet been worked out, like it has been with embryonic. This is an important distinction, as large numbers of cells are needed for the stem cell replacement therapies to work. Scientists believe that tissues derived from embryonic and adult stem cells may differ in the likelihood of being rejected after transplantation, and I think this is the kicker. We don't know yet for certain whether tissues derived from the embryonic stem cells would cause transplant rejection, since relatively few clinical trials have been tested for safety of transplanted cells derived from these. So adult stem cells have a higher quality because we know they have a better chance of your body taking them, because we're taking them from your own adult stem cell.
But it's labor intensive.
It's labor intensive, and we still don't know for certain it could be that embryonic stem cells produce it just fine and the transplants go just great and there is no issue. But we just don't know that for sure.
And I wanted to throw this in there. As I said, we were talking before, and as we were talking about it, it led us to the NobelPrize.org page. And it says this: the Nobel Prize recognizes 2 scientists who discovered that mature, specialized cells can be reprogrammed to become immature cells capable of developing into all tissues of the body. Their findings have revolutionized our understanding of how cells and organisms develop. And this was back in 2012.
Yes.
And you're seeing how these kind of advancements are working in time, and hopefully to create a happier and obviously much healthier world.
Yes, and as you were mentioning, it is going fast. Going back to the article, last month scientists in Japan said they had grown functional human liver tissue from stem cells in a similar process. Creating lab-grown tissue to replenish organs damaged by accident or disease is a holy grail for the pioneering field of stem cell research.
And they're searching for that holy grail with a great deal of intensity on behalf of literally tons of people who are begging them to.
Just like we all are.
Right.
And just like everybody else has been begging for us to continue, unfortunately we can't. The show's over.
It always bums me out, man, big time.
Yeah, we need more than an hour. Hopefully we can get that. And we can get that if you guys go on to Patreon and donate to the show.
And make sure, listen, we're on all the time, every day of the week, on Twitter at Paleo Radio Show, and at Facebook at facebook.com/Paleo Radio.
It's been fun, Jeremiah.
It's been so much fun, like every single time, my friend.
Thank you guys very much. We will see you next week.
Good night.
You've been listening to Paleo Radio, exclusively with Secular Media Group.